Yeah. Okay.
I just need to swap this one over.
Yeah. Well,
This one's not
it
working
does
very
work.
well. It's dropping out of signal.
Okay. So
So we'll put,
take it out.
yes please. Sorry about this. Just making sure that everything works. Thank you for your patience.
So, really, we'll have to start in time. Though people definitely.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for waking up so early. Unfortunately, we had to bring this session forward, and obviously, many people. Can you hear? It is. It is. Okay. Unfortunately, we had to bring this forward since Mr. Sharansky has to catch an earlier flight. Have to start on time because he has to leave on time as well. Just a word this week, we were very pleased to have almost 40 delegates on the behalf of the Jewish Agency here in Limud, which I think is a record. Mr. Sharansky is our main guest, together with Bassem and Bassem Eid and Benjamin Program. I still have 2 more lectures later today. Feel free to take one of these planned flyers, and you can find all the sessions that are planned by the Jewish Agency delegates. So, since we're short for time, he needs no introduction, Mr. Natan Sharansky.
Okay. I don't know, I'm supposed to stand or sit. There is no much difference. But okay. Okay. Good morning. I'm really sorry for this, the need to change the time of my lecture because I have to leave. So what I ask you, if people will be coming after I leave, you'll tell them what I said. So. The title of the lecture somehow sounds strange, about the future of Europe in Israel. Well, I think in the end you'll understand what I meant. But I'll start from the topic which looks like much more typical for the head of Jewish Agency, and in the end I'll come to the topic of our lecture. I'll start from the fact that this year was, which is finishing today, was extremely good for Aliyah. Extremely good. Almost 26,000 Jews made Aliyah this year, what is 35% increase in comparison with the past year. But there is even more unique data. It's first year in the history of the State of Israel when the number of Alim who come from the free world I mean United States of America, Canada, Western Europe, Australia, is bigger than the number of Alim who came from the other countries. What means what we call Aliyah of choice and Aliyah of rescue. We have terms. And definitely when we are speaking about Jews from Ukraine today, it's Aliyah of rescue. From Ethiopia, it's Aliyah from rescue. And even from Latin America, though it can be arguable, we call it still Aliyah of rescue. But it's first time in history that Aliyah of free choice is bigger, and if to look at the tendencies of from this year to the next, this tendency will continue big. And first of all, it's because of happening in Europe, and because of huge aliyah from France. You have to understand that if 2 years ago there was 1,800 Jews who made aliyah from France, last year it was 3,300, this year it's 7,000, and my prediction is that next year it will be close to 10,000. Because it's really growing with every day. It's not only the figures of aliyah. At this moment, every day in Paris, every day, we have 2 meetings with 200 people each, giving them initial information about Israel. It's people who called and asked to get this information, and because the number becoming bigger and bigger, so we are not doing it on individual level, we are doing it with groups. A year ago, it was 1 group in a month. Then, half a year ago, it was 1 group in 4 or 5 days. Today, it's 2 groups every day. That's the level of interest of people who start thinking about Aliyah. Estimations are, there was some estimation made that from 600,000 French Jews, at this moment, approximately 150,000 are thinking about Aliyah. Doesn't mean that they'll make this next year, of course, but it means that something very deep is changing in the perception of the people. I can also say that in the history of relations between Israel and the free world, there was practically never we had a situation that 0.5% of Jewish community moves in 1 year to Israel. We never had such a situation. Usually it's 1/10 of the percent. This year from France, it's more than 1%. And probably it will be moving in the direction of 2% a year. So from all the statistics, something unusual and big is happening in the biggest community of Jewish world after United States of America, by far the biggest community. So, and when it comes to analyze why it's happening, and I spend, of course, a lot of time in France and talking to these people, and in Israel, and we have a lot of specialists who are studying this situation, and our delegation in France increased greatly in the last 2 years. So the first obvious reason is, of course, is insecurity, acts of terror, acts of hooliganism, acts of robbery and rape, which are mainly coming from the extreme elements of Muslim community. I would say maybe even more than the acts of terror, what's even more significant that now it's already almost 12 years since the rabbis and teachers at school started telling to children not to go on the streets with kippah. I want you to understand that in Moscow, nobody says to Jewish children not to go in street with the kippah. And you know that traditionally prejudices and anti-Semitism in Russia was always strong. But today it's not a problem at all. There are other problems, but that's definitely not a problem. That in Paris, and I would say that in many areas of Paris, it's not dangerous at all to go on the kippah, but the parents and the religious leaders don't want to take risk. They're saying to children, no, the moment you go out of school or out of synagogue, you take kippah off or put a cap. The very fact that you have to live in this reality, and now it's already 12 years, it also shows kind of insecurity. It's very difficult for you to feel yourself really at home if you're all the time of want that you should remember and not to draw too much attention to your Jewishness. And so almost all the explanations why Jews are leaving, it's because of the threat which they feel from Muslim community. I am not sure, well, no doubt that that's like initial impulse. And the fact that 98% of Jews believe that situation in terms of anti-Semitism today in France is much worse than 10 years ago, and that's our study show. it shows what is in the mood. Having said all this, I have to say from our experience and history, the fact that there are even the most awful anti-Semitic, horrible accidents doesn't make people, Jews, to move if they feel that authorities are on their side. Only when it was in Germany or when it was in the Soviet Union, when people felt that official policy is sympathetic to anti-Semites, then they start moving in big numbers. Here I have to say, absolutely resolutely, the French government is doing everything to secure Jews, to support communities, to cooperate with the communities. Police is working very closely with the Jewish organizations which are taking care of the security and so on. Legislation is excellent. I'd like the other European countries adopt these types of legislations against anti-Semitism as French government did. So that's not the case. But I'm saying that it's not enough that in the neighboring house where lives the Muslim population, you feel danger from this. You must feel yourself really uncomfortable in your own house in order to want to leave. And here what's happening. There is France of Islam. There is France of, let's say, traditional conservative forces, France of Le Pen, let's say, which for many Jews traditionally is the France which looks on us Jews as the other and never feels that we are integral part of their own. And there is liberal France which was the house of Jews. It is their home. It is the home which they built, correctly so they feel that liberal France, which was built for the last 150, 200 years, it was built with a lot of Jewish thought and Jewish activism and Jewish energy and so on. It was their home. And this liberal France hates Israel. And that's not exaggeration. You have to understand, normal French Jew feels strong connection to Israel. Because, first of all, French Jewry is closely connected by families. Almost all of them have families in Israel. By history, they are mainly traditional Jews. And Israel is something very important for their identity. And if you live in the world of liberal France, and Israel is something very important to your identity, and you read the newspapers, which all your friends read, and every day they explain how problematic is the existence of a Jewish state in the Middle East. And then you go to your university and your colleagues, professors say, well, of course, you as a modern, normal person, as one of us, cannot not to condemn this awful policy of this state, and so on and so on. You feel, at least you feel some kind of discomfort. Of course, the argument will be, and it always is, that nobody hates Israel. In fact, we all love Israel, but we hate Israel's policy. Okay, we just now had this war during the summer. By the way, during this war, during the summer, we had the record number of Alim who came. So it means that in terms of, that doesn't mean that Jews started feeling themselves less secure on their way to Israel because of the war. But during this war, there was, as you all felt, a big number of articles against Israeli policy, condemning Israel for war crimes, and a number of Jews who published articles of why I cannot bear it anymore. I cannot continue supporting Israel. I cannot be with Israel. With pain, I am saying it's not my country anymore. I have to say, during this war, Israel suffered from terrorist attacks, something that no other civilization didn't suffer. When the thousands of missiles are falling on all your cities, that's what Israel had to do. Israel used the methods of minimizing the losses among civilians, which no other country ever used. Not England, not America, nobody. Israel, to send hundreds of thousands emails and SMSing to the civilians, leave your houses because we are going to attack this house in the next 24 hours. To develop special missile, mini missile, which is making boom in the house. What means that in 5 minutes there will be real attack on the house. In order there will be nobody in that house which Israel targets. And it targets this house only because it is used as headquarters for the terrorist organization, but we know that there is a lot of civilian population. And many other things which can be said, which Israel developed specifically with one aim, to minimize the number of victims. And with all this, it doesn't help. You can say, well, Israel doesn't explain itself enough. So it doesn't help because for the Western world, for European liberal world, the very idea of the existence of Jewish national state in the middle of Arab world, when we, people of the free world, already overcame this prejudice. We don't need national states. We are against this idea of nationalism. We are post-nationals. We are multiculturalists. And they are taking us to the past. And how many more children, Palestinian and Jewish, should be killed before you, Israel, understand that you have nothing to do in the Middle East? First time I was told about it by a group of French intellectuals 12 years ago, in the time of Second Intifada. Some of them were Jewish, who were explaining me exactly this, that we, at some moment, maybe Israel was a good, Zionist project was a good idea, but it didn't work, because East is East and West is West, and West understood long ago that national state is not a good thing. And here you people of the West, leave us, leave our home, go to the East, and try to impose this colonial idea of national state there. Who needs it? Come back to us where you really belong, and stop this bloodshed. That's what I heard 12 years ago. I thought it's absolutely crazy idea, but I have to say, you can see how deep it goes. It becomes part of philosophy of liberal world in Europe, and what makes, of course, situation with Israel absolutely impossible. I only want to give one quote, which was in New York Times during the war, when one very good citizen of Holland, who saved Jews in the time of Holocaust and received special medal from Israeli government, and his name is Hank Zanoli. He published the letter, which was in New York Times, and during this war, that Hank Zanoli decided to return his medal to Israel, and he wrote that I supported the idea of a Jewish national home, but eventually I came to believe that Zionism has a racist element in its aspiring to build a state exclusively for Jews. The only way out of this quagmire the Jewish people of Israel have gotten themselves into would be to forgo Israel's Jewish character completely. At that point, I would consider taking back my medal. Well, we don't know, he's almost 90 years old. We don't know who influences him. But I have to say that this sweeping idea that the problem of the free world is because there was this crazy idea of Jews to create national Jewish state in the Middle East. And yes, there is no way that there will be more bloodshed, and of course there will be another war in a few months. And we can keep saying as much as we want what we are doing in order to minimize the number of the victims, but there will be victims when missiles are launched on Tel Aviv from the school. We will have to react, so there will be more victims. And with every victim, this feeling of the liberal world that how many kids have to be killed before this Jewish state will stop bothering us is becoming deeper and deeper. And I believe from many observations, from many conversations, from many debates which I had, that's what makes for European Jewry, and first of all for a French Jewry, the life in Europe so uncomfortable. Because here is, what is French society? It's like, at this moment, 3 big houses. House of Islam, house of conservative, and to some Christian Europe, and house of liberal France. And in all these houses, it's not their home, or they don't feel that they're their home. In fact, I already met a number of French Jews who told me, I have no choice, I'll vote for Le Pen and I'll make Aliyah. So, because I think that's the best what we can have in France now, it's Le Pen, but that's not for me, so I'll go to Israel, and that's what I can do for France. I'll vote for Le Pen before I go to Israel. It sounds like a joke, but there is some very deep philosophy in this. Now I'm going really to the topic of my lecture, how it became that the idea of national state became so hostile to modern Europe. After all, idea of national state is the European idea. When I say, if there's a future for Europe, I say, if there is a future for the basic European idea of national state. Because, and by the way, liberalism was born together with this idea. If you look all the history of Locke and Montesquieu and Spinoza and all the thinkers of the French Revolution, the idea of creating liberal society went together with the need of national state because, on one hand, before they were monarchies, empires, which the more people you control, the more religions you control, the better. But then it became clear that it's, you cannot have the society of civil rights and protect the rights of every individual if this state is so big that people who are citizens, they have nothing in common. There must be some strong common base. What is identity? It can be religious base, it can be national state, it can be some historical feelings of togetherness. And that gives critical mass big enough in order they can defend themselves, in order they can advance their economy, but small enough in order they can easily give equal rights to everybody. And so the idea of liberal society and the idea of national state went hand in hand together. They developed together. They were a direct product of French Revolution, but they started, they discussed like almost 100 years before. But so how it changed? Now I want to take you into 1 week of the First World War, the first week of November of 1917. In 1 week, in fact, during 3 days, there were 2 huge historic events. Who knows what I'm talking about? Yeah. Huh? Russian Revolution and Balfour Declaration. It was all in 1 week. In fact, in New York Times, because the news went slow, it was all on the same page. It was like the 7th of November and the 3rd of November. So, one is Russian Revolution. Russian Revolution, which proclaimed new reality, that now we are creating different type of the world. We are creating the world of equals. And in order it will be the world of equals, we have to remove all the differences between people. So nationalism is big prejudice. Religion is opium for the people. Of course, national state is a very bad idea. And we will not need it, because we will erase all these identities and we will create new entities. The other was Balfour Declaration, which was saying that Jewish people deserve their national state, and we, Great Britain, promise that we'll use all our political power in order Palestine will become home for national state of Jewish people. We can say that they were, in terms of idea of national state, it was 2 opposite phenomena. And one can say, okay, history judged, and made its conclusions. The communist revolution, thanks God, turned into the biggest failure after killing tens of millions of its own citizens, but it's disappeared. And Zionism is the only really serious revolution which emerged victorious in the 20th century, and thanks God, we won. But you know, the history of ideas has its own development. Sometimes it's not connected to the success or failure of the same idea in reality. Because really, at that moment, after the First World War, the idea of national state was at the highest of its popularity. Because as a result of First War, the last empires which were in Europe fell apart. Russian and Austro-Hungary and Habsburg, all these empires fell apart. And at least 20 new national states emerged in Europe. And so it was clear that that is the right movement of the history. So when idea of Zionism came, the world of Goyim, non-Jewish world, accepted it very naturally. They were not ready to fight for this, but they said, of course, national state, that's good. Those who were absolutely indifferent to this idea were Jews. Zionists, those who were supporting this idea, was tiny minority. You, remember, well, of course, for many Jews after Russian Revolution, many Jews in America and other, socialism was their new, for some of them communism was their new philosophy. For many of them socialism was real philosophy and not nationalism. So Bund was the most national thing which they could think about, and Bund was Jewish socialists who were of course against the Zionist idea. Orthodox religious world, as you know in Europe, ultra-Orthodox was all against the Zionist idea. Reformed conservative movement denied, all the idea of a reformed movement then was to be good French citizens and good German citizens, good American citizens in the street, and to be Jews at home. That was the idea of the reformed movement then. So overwhelmingly Jewish people were not there. But on the level of idea, the world was accepting it well. And then there was the Second World War, and there was Holocaust, and everything changed. For Jews, practically all the Jews in the world, those who survived, they became Zionists. Not meaning that they themselves wanted to go to Israel, but after Holocaust, to keep feeling that there is logic in this world, that there is logic in Jewish history, that there is justice of God, it's very difficult. And Israel came as the response and the answer, yes, there is justice, yes, there is logic, yes, there is God. So practically all the Jews in the world accepted Israel as the natural, the only response, and only, what a pity that it came too late and we could save a few million of our people. So Jewish world really switched their attitude to the idea of Jewish national state. And at the same time, what happened in Europe? Europe, on the level of its leading intellectuals, leading philosophers, and with the time also politicians, came to the idea that we paid such a high price of 200 years of religious wars, and that this awful century of national wars, enough. Nationalism is a bad thing. Religion is a bad thing. We need to create the world without identities. Post-national world, multicultural world, postmodern world, in fact, that became important word, that all these identities, it's a relative thing. So let's create postmodern world where they are really not important. The dream, the real ideal was the song of John Lennon, Imagine the world, no borders, where there is no religions, where there is no gods, and where, that's important for us, there is nothing to die for. We have to come, that is the modern paradise for Europe. The world where there is nothing to fight for and nothing to die for. But for this, we have to overcome all these prejudices. And so in this world, though nobody after the war could resist to the idea of a Jewish state after all this horrible tragedy. But on ideological level, the idea of national state was something belonging to the past, to colonial past. And we are finishing with this. We don't need it anymore. And Israel is on the wrong side of the history. That's what happened on the ideological level. And then when you go to the modern France, and to some extent also to England, and you see how it happened that there is such a huge community of Muslims, or Muslim population, who many of them, not everybody, but many of them are not sharing and accepting ideas of the free will society at all. How it is that they all get this citizenship? How it is? That's exactly direct result of this idea of postmodernism, of our sin towards the world because of our colonial past, and that we should end our belief that all the identities are relative. It's a relative value, and what means that the culture which is built on the principles of human rights has absolutely the same right to exist as the culture which is not built on the principles of human rights. And here in England, you have many leading philosophers who are proving that we have no moral right to demand from these people who are coming to accept our system of values, because it's all relative. So it seems like abstract philosophical discussion. But as a result, America has at least as big Muslim community. But it's a Muslim community which accepted that they are sharing the values of free world. And Europe has a huge Muslim community which partially accepts, partially doesn't, but didn't have to accept it. So that's one result. And the other result is that we have so-called liberal Europe, because I call it so-called, because when you really believe that everything is relative and that supporting dictator is the same as supporting not dictator, it's post-liberal. For me, postmodern Europe became post-liberal, because for us, for liberals who were fighting dictatorship in the Soviet Union, it was so clear that liberalism means that you are always against dictatorship. And here, the moment you change it and say the highest value is peace and the highest value is human life, it means that we should have a world in which there is nothing to fight for. People should not have died. So you don't have strength and desire to fight for anything. And that's why if some dictator can guarantee you peace, you'll support this dictator. And that's what's happening for the last 20 years all the time. So in this post-liberal Europe, Israel is something which belongs to the past. And here, in the past, I was always giving analogies between anti-Semitism and new anti-Semitism, and they invented the 3 Ds, which are used very often to show that the same approaches are used by classical anti-Semitism and by modern attitudes to Israel. Here's a very simple example. Christian anti-Semitism was built on the idea that we moved ahead, we created new breed, new testimony, breed is new covenant, and Jews had to be the first. All apostles were Jews, so they had to be together with us, and they're not with us. Well, I know here sitting some of our best Christian friends, and who became our best partners in our struggles. They understand very well. The anti-Semitism of Catholic Church for 1,000 years was all based on this feeling that we went ahead, we advanced, we moved to the higher values, and they stayed in the past, and that's why they are punished. I would say very often when I see and discuss things with some intellectuals of Europe, that's absolutely the same feeling. We, intellectuals, we moved ahead. We are now above these national prejudices. And Israel tries to, Israel, which insists that it's part of free world, and it is really democracy like we, but it takes us back. It tries to stay in these ideas of national state, which are really belong to the past, we don't need it, and stop fighting, come back to us, join us. As one French intellectual told me, join us in the real important cultural war today. I said, what is the real important cultural war today? Between us and America's head, between European culture and American culture. So that's, for him, it's the real great liberal struggle of today. So finishing all this last, the beginning exodus of Jews from Europe, which France is by far the biggest example, I think has a very deep, serious roots. It has some consequences for us, for Jewish people, but it has even much bigger consequences for the future of Europe. Because if Europe will not give up this idea how good to live in the world where there is nothing to fight for, this decadent approach to the life which should have no identity depth, it will have no strength to fight in the wars which already came to Europe. And there is one state in this world which not from the times of French Revolution, but from the times of Exodus from Egypt was insisting that identity and freedom go together. We became people when we left Egypt. Then for the first time we are called people. So only when we got freedom and identity together. And for 1,000 years we were insisting that we are not ready to give up one for the sake of the others. And we are now, and Israel is between two worlds, between the world, Arab world, which again and again decides that identity is more important than freedom. And so if freedom is undermining our identity, we will give it away. And on the other hand, there is Europe, which decided that freedom is more important than identity. And if identity creates problems for our freedom, we'll give it away. And in between, there is Israel, which says these are two basic desires of every person to be free and to belong, and we keep it together. And that's exactly what the idea of French Revolution philosophers, to keep it together, to have national state and liberal state. One has to go with the other. So what I'm saying, and that's what my conversation with Alan Finkielkraut, French philosopher, but a very deeply thinking French philosopher. And I came to him with these concerns if there is any future for Jews in Europe. And he said that, from his point, concern is much deeper. If there is future for Europe in Europe, for European values in Europe. And I said to him, I can assure you that we in Israel will always keep European values high, and Europe will always have its place in Israel. That's all. Thank you. Okay, I have to catch my airplane, but I have time for a couple of questions. Yeah, please. Right.
Thank you very much. I live in Bristol, southwest part of England. I keep involved Jewishly. I read the Jewish Chronicle. I keep up to date. I come to Limud. I read in the Jewish Chronicle that Mr. Sharansky has said, they may be misquoting you, that Jews have no future in Europe. This unsettles me greatly because I want to stay in England. When I hear you today, I feel even more unsettled. Can you give me any reassurance that in England the situation is not as dire as you say? And also, is it not right that what you are saying may be self-fulfilling?
Well, I think that article in Jewish Chronicle, it wasn't my article, as you saw. It's some journalist spoke to me, and then he put, without any logical connection, number of my phrases. So I was really very upset with that article because, and then I wrote more or less what I said just now. I wrote and put it in mosaics in American Jewish newspaper, in order simply to put a slogan, there is no future for Jews in Europe, without explaining all what I just explained now. It seems that simply I am like that primitive Zionist who wants to frighten Jews, go, please go quickly, and it's good for me as the chairman of Jewish Agency. And definitely it's not what I meant, and they tried to explain it, and I explained it, I hope now I explain myself well. I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned about it not because I don't want you to move to Israel. I believe that Israel is a great place for Jews, but I also respect everybody who decides to live in other places. And as you know, maybe know that I really changed all the policy of Jewish agencies, saying that there should be no wall between the world of Aliyah and the world of Jewish identity. Our aim has to strengthen Jewish identity of Jews everywhere in the world. Those who want to live in Israel, those who don't want to live in Israel, and those who lived in Israel and left Israel. And Israel should play an important role in strengthening this identity. That's my philosophy. Now, I think what is happening today in Europe is extremely dangerous for the future of the world civilization. And Israel is part of this civilization. So if Europe will lose in the war against Islam and will be Islamized, nothing good for this also will be in Israel. So I try to be very egoistic at this point. So from this point, yeah, your interest, which is not exactly my interest, to stay forever in England, and my interest to have Israel as a part of Western civilization strong, to have Western civilization strong, are common interests. I don't want to run away from the reality that Europe in the last 30, 40 years is displaying less and less willingness to fight for its own values. So you ask me, tell me something optimistic. It depends on you guys. If you, those who want to live in Europe, will decide that the only way to, the only Europe in which you want to live is the one that you will be ready to fight for its values, that's different. But it's not what's happening at this moment on ideological level of European political leadership. If you are even afraid to call Islam terrorists as Islam terrorists, that's what's happening in Britain. If you are trying, and in France it was happening until recently, only in the last months that they understood that they cannot continue deceiving themselves. In Britain they still believe that they can continue deceiving themselves, and they try to. But if you are not ready to ask what is wrong in our system, that already thousands of people who were born in Britain and who went to our schools and even went to our universities want to join ISIS or become very devoted enemies of democratic civil society, if you will not ask what is wrong in our system, what has to be changed, you will not change it. And if you will not change it, I have no good news for you. So look, I as a chairman of Jewish Agency have to think first of all how to make sure that those who want to come will be helped and absorbed. You are the one who decided that you and your children and grandchildren and grandchildren will live in Europe. You have two challenges. First of all, how to make sure that your grandchildren will be Jewish. But second, how to make sure that they will live in liberal society for this, and not in post-liberal Europe, which has no future. Okay? Okay.
I speak at functions, and I'm no good like this one's a bit better. I'm so delighted to meet you, Mr. Sharansky. We have a daughter, son-in-law, and 4 grandchildren live in Jerusalem, yes. And most of them kids are in the army, and our grandson was in Gaza near the tunnels. So we're but it's a very tough decision for us Jews in England, because we're not going to a safe haven in Israel. There will be more wars there, because if we've got to stand up for ourselves, which we have to, our other grandchildren will also be in the army there. So do we stay here or do we go there? But I believe we should make Aliyah. I really do, especially, but the young people will add. What will all the older people do there? Will be a drain, will we, on the community? What do you think?
And the community here. What the last phrase I didn't know.
Not the older people that are making Aliyah.
Oh,
Well, I mean, the young people should go and help, I believe, because it will continue anti-Semitism here. It's just a sign of what will happen in the future.
okay. Look, classically, usually the head of Jewish agency usually comes and says everybody has to go to Israel. I'm not doing it. I refuse to do it. When I was released from prison and my prime minister told me, now you go to America, say that everybody has to immigrate to Israel. And I'm not doing it now when I'm chairman of Jewish Agency, because I believe that Aliyah is a very personal choice. And it's good, by the way, that we have more and more percentage of Aliyah of people of free choice who are making this choice freely, not because of pogroms. But if you ask me, I believe that for those who want to be actively involved in the future of Jewish people, influence on Jewish history, no doubt that Israel is by far the most important place, and with the most full, rich Jewish life, and also without any need for double think, for double loyalty, for some feelings. As in the most free societies, I hear sometimes from Jews, well, I cannot really say it exactly like this because people will think I'm saying it's only because of Jew and so on. And in Israel, people can say anything what they want. The most strong criticism against Israel and the most strong compliments to Israel without thinking twice who will think what and so on. So I believe personally that life in Israel is extremely comfortable and good for Jews. With the wars every few months, and I cannot promise that it will change, but moral comfort and opportunities to fight for your ideals, including ideals of freedom and human rights for everybody and respect for everybody, are unlimited in Israel. Now, as to the capacity of absorption, Israel not only proved that it can absorb everybody, it also proved that it can benefit from all of it. From all of it, in the end, Israel became much stronger. And people succeeded. We had 1 million Jews from the Soviet Union. It was unbelievable balagan. I was then fighting against all the establishment, why they are not doing this and why they are not doing this. And then one generation after this, average income of those who came from the Soviet Union are higher than average income of Israelis in general, because they came with a lot of ambition, with a lot of knowledge, with a lot of desire to succeed and so on. And society benefited tremendously, everybody. There were a lot of old people who came. And we had, when we entered the government, we had to make big pressure to put a lot of money for social housing for these people. And it was not enough. You still have this problem. I have to say that those who are coming with the money, old people, and can pay for private hostels, their conditions are better than those when they came from the Soviet Union. They didn't have money to pay for this, and so it's natural. But in general, we absorbed 1 million Jews. So after all, even if it will be 150,000 Jews from France, it's Katan Aleinu. I say Katan Aleinu. And by the way, this Aliyah from France, 25% are old people, pensioners, and usually they have less problems because from France they're coming with their pensions. It's not like from the Soviet Union. 25% are non-adults, and 50% are families, young families. It's mainly Aliyah of young families with children. Yeah. Okay, well, these are well, you decide.
One of the things that's said about Israel that it's neither European nor a Middle East country. Do you see that the future of Israel becoming more European and being a kind of bit of Europe within the Middle East, or should it become more Middle Eastern?
First of all, Israel is both European and Middle East. We are part of the free world, and we are part of the Middle East. And we cannot move to Uganda or somewhere else from the Middle East, and we are not going to give up our values. And the question is not whether Israel will become more European. where Europe will stay European? That's the question. Israel sticks to this idea of liberal national state. It's fine. Well, we have our own debates about the law, and of course, left and right tries to go to the extreme, proving that this part of the equation is more important than that. And Israel has no choice. It will not survive if it will not remain Jewish democratic state. So this fundamental value of Europe, of connection between liberalism and identity, Israel will keep. Europe is abandoning this value. And what I want to say, that Europe doesn't have too much time, doesn't have another 100 years to continue abandoning it. So I can only promise you that Israel will stay European. Whether Europe will stay or become Middle Eastern country without liberty, that's another question. Yeah.
Do you see any difference between the British political parties in their recognition of this issue that you've just reminded us of, and any indication of their commitment to assert, if you like, British values? We see bits of it now in response to the Trojan horse. I'm not sure if you know, Islamic taking over of some schools. Do you see any difference between the British political parties?
You know, we have enough headache with our political parties. You want to no, I tell you, traditionally, socialist parties usually were abandoning the connection with the identity more easily, because of historically and so, and they believe that social issues are more important than issues of faith or issues of national identity. That's traditionally. On the other hand, everything becomes so confused and so mixed, and sometimes you hear some statement of the person and you think, oh, of course he's Labour, and then they find out that he's conservative, and and vice versa. And I don't know, on the one hand, we have some conservative members of the parliament who are ready to believe in the most awful inventions about Israeli soldiers collecting the organs of Palestinians. And on the other hand, of course, we hear from some Labour that Yasser Arafat is the best human rights activist which we ever had. So, yeah.
I made Aliyah myself 11 years ago, but I see people around me concerned and sometimes leaving Israel mostly for economic reasons. And I would like to know if the Jewish Agency has a strategy to make sure that people who are already made Aliyah or live in Israel are staying in Israel.
You made Aliyah from France?
Switzerland.
From Switzerland, okay.
Sorry, a free country.
Yeah, no, it was your free choice. It's great. Your choice was much more difficult than mine, really. And no, of course, okay. Golden curtain is much stronger than iron curtain that we saw from many things. Yeah. Look, it's not the policy of Jewish agencies, but policy of Israeli government also. To make sure that those who came, their integration will be easy. And I can tell in comparison with any other country, the percentage of the budget that Israel permanently spends on through Ministry of Absorption or through other ministries to help the new immigrants is unprecedented. The benefits which the state is getting after this are also very big. Look, you said that you're upset that mostly people are doing it because of material reasons. First of all, I have to say it was always like this in history. When I am told, well, you're Aliyah, you were such idealists, you were fighting this, and look who's coming down from Russia, from this, they all, what they are thinking about their jobs and so on. It's all nonsense. Every aliyah, the aliyot which built Israel, the second and third, they were all running from the pogroms. They didn't want to go, well, of course they were Zionists. They were people who, in the early age, decided they are Zionists and they're ready to die for this and so on. It's 1 in 10,000. In all aliyot which are coming, there are some leaders who are ready to go to prison. And the overwhelming majority is coming because the conditions of life changed, and comparing conditions of life here and there, they prefer to be there. The other thing that to compare it on the basis of material things, it's not the only criteria, as we know. Because, yes, we can say that for many American Jews, it's more difficult to make aliyah because of material status. But I can say that even from France, many people are living more, well, France is really a welfare state. And the conditions which are getting the people, like kviyut, tenure on their work. After 3 or 4 years, nobody can fire them. And when they are work for 15 years, they can go on pension. And there are unbelievable conditions. Socialism in its most powerful expression. They will never get such conditions in Israel. And you know, I spoke to many people, it's not something what is really a criteria. When we have all these checks, why you're coming, what was important for you, what was not important. Of course, to have a job is very important in order to continue. But to improve the level of your life, material life, almost no one says. To live in Jewish state, that's by far criteria number 1, which in the end makes people to move, and I'm sure in your case it was also the same. Desire to live in national Jewish state when this idea of national state becomes so unpopular here. Yeah, well, I'm sorry, one more question, otherwise I will miss my paper.
Can you expand a little bit on why the liberal movement has such a fixation and a negative image of the nation state? I understand the issue of the importance, the value of peace, but the First World War was a war of empires, not of nation states. And the Second World War was a war of race, not of nation state either. It was a war to make an empire rather than to make a nation state. So where does this? So I don't see actually when you said a liberal national state or democratic states. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there has never been a war between 2 democratic states. There have been wars between democratic states and dictatorships, but between 2 democracies, there has never been a war. So why this liberal fixation and hate of the nation state?
Well, look, that's the whole big lecture, and you can ask more professionals. I can recommend you, I'm sorry for this, but to buy my book through Amazon, Defending Identity, where there is 2 chapters about how Europe started hating its own identity. And it was written 6 years ago. And I felt that I had to write it after my book, The Case for Democracy, which was very popular, but people started saying that, oh, so you believe only in democracy. And I understood that I always believed that only these 2 things connect together, identity and liberalism, can be real power. But there, while working on this book, and again, I am not a philosopher and I'm not a historian. My daughter was born as a historian and philosopher, and now he got her 1st and 2nd degree in history and philosophy. So when I talk to her, I understand to what extent I am not a philosopher and historian. But even a little bit, I was learning, it's really interesting. First of all, Europe was in love with communism, liberal Europe. Some outstanding writers like Bernard Shaw, many others, at the times when Stalin already was the most awful butcher in the world, we were explaining how we have to understand, appreciate, and love and dream about this world. So there was, it was not on the level, of course, of practical atrocities of communism, but on the level of the idea of having the world where everybody is equal and nobody exploiting anybody, was something extremely attractive for liberal Europe. And of course, they went more in the socialist direction, not in the social democratic expression. But probably there is something in intellectual Europe which was those who started from national liberalism to move to the cosmopolitan. Now it failed. It failed big. And look who were the most powerful and popular philosophers of post-nationalism. Hobsbawm. Hobsbawm passed away a few years ago in England. Extremely respectable philosopher. You know that he was a communist to the end. He continued defending Soviet Union when Soviet Union sent their tanks to Budapest in 1956. I don't remember whether he said something like this. Even after Soviet Union fell already, he was still speaking how moral lesson of this effort is. And so this person, then this philosophy failed. He's looking now for the other philosophy which can be cosmopolitan. And so he comes to this post-nationalism, united Europe, above all the nations. And so it's interesting to think what was in liberal Europe, which really created the most powerful ideas of human rights and so on, what was pushing it all the time to this idea of cosmopolitan society. When in Soviet Union it was already clear for all of us that's the awful idea which can bring only to a lot of injustice in this world. And then, of course, no doubt that the shock of the Second World War also played a very important role, because people don't go into specific details. You said it was more racism and this. People understand that here, France and Germany, for 100 years were fighting to whom belongs Westphalia and Lotharingia, or whatever it's called. And that was the most important thing for them. And for this, tens of millions of people were killed. Who cares? In the real democracy, who cares? They're right. The land by itself should have no value. The freedom should have value. And so it helped them to go in the opposite direction. And look very carefully, who were the first ideologists of post-nationalism? They all had one or another type of communist background, of Frankfurt School, Marcuse and all this. So they lost their battle for Marxist ideas. So now they came and they continued their battle here. Order my book through Amazon and